Hello everyone. Long ago, both in the galaxy and in our real world, there has been a phenomenon known as corruption. For some countries, it is a disease. For others, corruption has become the norm. And there are even those that simply cannot function without corrupt relationships throughout the government. In the Star Wars universe, corruption certainly exists as well. One of the main criticisms leveled at the Galactic Republic is the rampant corruption among officials at all levels, especially in the Senate. Bribery was one of the causes of the global political crisis, which led to thousands of planets seceding from the Republic and the start of the Clone Wars. In general, during those years, the understanding took hold that an honest senator was an impossible character. And anyway, a bribe is like dopamine. No matter how much you get, you still want more. In this video, I want to tell you about several major corruption scandals in the Republic during the last decades of its existence. If you like what I do, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. You can also support the channel on Patreon. All of this helps a lot, and thank you to everyone who does. Alright, let's get started. Corruption in the Republic has existed for centuries. Without bribes, kickbacks, and blackmail, the Republic's government machinery simply couldn't function. In creating the image of a rotten Senate, George Lucas drew on historical examples of corrupt, decaying democracies and the US government apparatus, where lobbying for a few bucks isn't even seen as a bad thing. Lucas often pulled stunts like this. For example, the prototypes for Newt Gunray are both Ronald Reagan and Newt Gingrich. Gunray is actually an anagram of the surname Reagan. In the Senate, corruption was a constant companion to many decisions, but the public was not supposed to know about it, which is why high-profile trials were rare. Almost everyone took bribes, and the proceeds went to senators' advisors, law enforcement agencies, and even anti-corruption committees tasked with combating this phenomenon. After Palpatine came to power, corruption did not disappear entirely, though it did decline. Palpatine built a loyal bureaucracy, and the fact of a bribe was a good way to pressure a senator into making a decision favorable to the Sith. Or it provided a reason to remove a troublesome politician if he dared to oppose the Chancellor's ideas. One of the most high-profile scandals involved a quartet of senators engaged in the illegal protection of slave traders. The Judicial Department investigation team managed to apprehend a Talassian slave trader on Gindine who was attempting to sell a group of attractive Twi'lek girls. During interrogation, he did not remain silent and named 4 senators: Ticus, Wuja Wojine, Bufus Ritzimus, and Danry Ledwello. It turned out that the senators were providing legal cover for all the slave traders' operations in exchange for substantial payments. Ticky's was particularly active, having a hand in organizing the sale of slaves, while Danry Ledwello handled communications with the slave traders. The other 2 handled the paperwork, allowing the criminals to evade law enforcement. They were unable to stall the case or buy their way out, as the investigation was receiving extensive media coverage, particularly on HoloNet News. The senators were arrested and placed under house arrest in their home planet's embassies. While the slaves they had sold toiled on the plantations, the senators enjoyed the luxury of their apartments. A week before the trial, all the senators except Danry fled. Tikke's extensive experience in bribery helped them not only escape but also join the ranks of the separatists. Danry Ledwello later fled to his slave trading partners as well. This Urquhart was eventually brought to justice during the Imperial era, but that is another story. Ticky's, however, managed to convince the majority of the Quarren to side with the Confederacy of Independent Systems, which dealt a blow to the Republic and escalated the conflict with the Mon Calamari. The uproar surrounding this case was also fueled by other senators, allowing them to catch their breath for a while and more actively engage in their dirty dealings. Ryloth's officials didn't exactly have spotless reputations either. Chom Frey Ka, who represented the Gaulis sector, was dealing in a potent psychotropic substance called glitteril shortly before the Clone Wars. Senator Chom Frey Ka bribed police departments and authorities on many planets, organized local supply chains, and, using his official position, shielded the shipment of the substance from unwanted scrutiny by the Galactic Republic's Department of Justice. The business was brought to an end by the Jedi Quinlan Vos, who nearly turned to the dark side of the Force. The senator was arrested and put on trial on Coruscant. Given that Chom Frey Ka's case was heard in the Republic Supreme Court, there is no doubt that the publicity was extensive. You can learn more about this story in the Republic comic book series, issues 20, 21, and 22. Interestingly, the Republic and the Jedi turned a blind eye to the Ryloth slave trade, despite their declared fight against slavery. a classic case of double standards. An example of this attitude among the Jedi and Republic officials toward the issue can be found in the first novel of the Jedi Apprentice series. It's called The Rising Force. In it, a passenger ship carrying slaves departs from Coruscant for Bandamir, and there was also a Jedi on board. If Orfree Ta hadn't tried to get the young Jedi Aayla Secura hooked on his product, his colleagues in the Senate might not have taken notice of his shenanigans. But in defending a fellow member of the Order, the Jedi were ready to beat anyone over the head. Orfree Ta's actions were secretly instigated by Darth Sidious, who planned to lure Quinlan Vos to the dark side. It didn't work this time, though it did happen during the Clone Wars. The next senator became a problem for the Sith. After Orfree Ta was imprisoned, his friend Connis Trell took the vacant seat. One dealer of illegal substances went to jail, and another took his place. Trell was the largest kingpin on all of Coruscant. He took over the supply chain organized by his predecessor and struck a deal with criminal figures, Groff Hogg of Hogg Nerf Industries and Doug Sebulto. Sebulto ran the slave trade directly from the Republic's capital, taking care not to keep slaves on Coruscant itself for safety's sake. Senator Trell provided cover for the entire operation, telling reporters that he was an upstanding citizen with clean hands. Doug claimed the same, though in his case it was true, since his hands were his legs. Ironically, Trell headed the Senate Investigative Committee. It's not hard to guess how effectively the committee, led by a senator who supplied the capital of the entire Republic with a variety of, so to speak, stimulants, kept an eye on the judicial system. In addition to controlled substances, he and his accomplices had become enamored with the ideas of the Bando Gora cult, led by the Dark Jedi Kamari Vosa, a former apprentice of Count Dooku. Trell also provided cover for the activities of this criminal organization. The cult also controlled Senator Ainley Tim of Malastare, who was running for the office of Chancellor. Had it not been for Palpatine's intervention, there was a possibility that the cult-controlled senator would have assumed the highest office in the Republic. However, immediately after the Supreme Chancellor election, which Ainley Tim lost, attempts were made to get rid of the now useless senator. Sebulto even hired mercenaries. But the plot to assassinate the senator failed. The group of mercenaries, led by Doug Genetaza, failed in their mission, and soon they themselves were eliminated by another bounty hunter, Jango Fett. It was Jango Fett who sent Trell on his way to the afterlife. The senator managed to press the panic button, and a squad of special forces from the CSF rushed to the rescue. They demanded the hostage be released, and the mercenary simply let him go. Literally, he let him go from the balcony into the abyss of Coruscant. Arnold Schwarzenegger also let Sully go in the movie Commando. Along with Trell, Sebulto, and Groff Hogg met their end. Details of this story can be found in the game Bounty Hunter, the novel Darth Plagueis, and the 3-volume edition of The Complete Star Wars Encyclopedia. The politicians' misdeeds did not endear the senators to the people, and during the Separatist crisis, they became prime fodder for Separatist propaganda. Orfree Ta deserves special mention. Following Trell's death, he took the Senate seat in 31 BBY. He was a fat and greedy Twi'lek, a master of lobbying and kickbacks. You can see him in the movies and the Clone Wars animated series. Unlike previous senators, he proved to be a political long-timer, holding office until the end of the Clone Wars and even during the Empire. He began his rise to the top of politics as a tax collector. He later headed the Ryloth Tax Bureau. Even then, he was known as a tyrant, a miser, and a bribe taker. But this not only didn't prevent him from filling a vacant Senate seat, it actually helped him. 100,000 credits to this one, 100,000 to another, 1,000,000 to a third, and now he holds a position on Coruscant. Most of his colleagues in the Senate openly despised Orfree Ta. He was also the one who facilitated Mas Amedda's appointment as vice chairman of the Senate, pulling strings through the wallets of influential figures. Through Amedda, he hoped to influence the Chancellor, but the Twi'lek miscalculated. Palpatine proved to be more cunning and manipulated him as he pleased. He led the political party, Rim Faction, which promoted the interests of megacorporations in the Outer Rim. This party is well described in the novels Darth Plagueis and Cloak of Deception, as well as in reference materials. Here I feel it necessary to add a note. I'll explain what was happening in these outlying regions thanks to the lobbying efforts of Orfree Ta and his colleagues, who were generously showered with suitcases full of cash by businessmen from the Trade Federation and the Corporate Alliance. Thanks to lobbyists from the Trade Federation, several senators, and some lower-ranking officials, a campaign was launched urging humans and non-humans to colonize the worlds of the Outer Rim. Why did the businessmen from the Trade Federation need this? There was a lot of money involved. They had come up with an interesting way to get rich legally. The fact was that the recommended and safe hyperspace routes for colonization were determined by the Trade Federation itself. Their fleet was responsible for the safety of these routes. Settlements founded by colonists were partially subordinate to the Trade Federation, and they could only be established in areas designated by the TF by leasing land belonging to you-know-who. But that's not all. All tariffs and registration fees associated with travel along the established routes, as well as a significant portion of the taxes collected, went into the Trade Federation's treasury. The colonists could spend their hard-earned money in stores owned by the Trade Federation, and if the colonists didn't like something, they could only fly back to their homeland on TF ships, and a ticket could cost a fortune. All these conditions were spelled out in the provisions of a bill that Trade Federation lobbyists pushed through the Senate. Naturally, the bill's passage for the signature was accompanied by the transfer of a certain sum of money to the politicians responsible for the matter. Incidentally, the campaign was funded from the Republican budget, and the tender for the creation of campaign materials was won by a marketing firm owned by the Trade Federation. In other words, the Neimoidians not only instantly recouped the money spent on bribes at the expense of the Republican budget, but also secured a wonderful source of legal income for free. At the same time, Republican officials received a considerable sum of money that could be spent on yachts, expensive speeders, and mansions. As for the fate of the colonists under the Trade Federation's rule, few people cared. Let's return to Orfree Ta. Ta was even friends with Jabba the Hutt and was the epitome of hypocrisy. He publicly condemned the slave trade, even though it was the norm on his homeworld of Ryloth. As the Clone Wars approached, Orfree Ta, quickly getting his bearings, became a staunch supporter of the bill to create a pan-Republican armed force to defend the Republic from the Separatists. That's how it went. Just yesterday, his friend was Pasil Argenti, one of the founders of the Confederacy of Independent Systems and, so to speak, this character's sponsor, and now Orfree Ta is calling for the creation of an army. For this, by the way, the Separatists have put a bounty of 16,000 credits on Orfree Ta's head, a very symbolic sum. He used to make more than that in a single day by manipulating the Republic's budget. By comparison, a bounty of 22 million credits has been placed on Padme Amidala's head. During the war, the senator grew concerned about Ryloth's fate, securing funding and humanitarian aid. But even then, he didn't miss an opportunity to consolidate his power. In exchange for helping the partisan leader Cham Syndulla, he received a guarantee that Syndulla would not interfere with his efforts to line his own pockets. By the end of the war, Ta was considered one of the most corrupt senators, and Palpatine kept him around solely as a tool to control the Rylothan populace. The senators did not stop taking bribes and embezzling the budget even during the war. For example, Bez Drex was dismissed for accepting a bribe from Uncle Pasil Argenti. There was also the Rodian senator Anaconda Farr, who gave a large bribe to Senator Ronet Kaur, who was responsible for military planning. Rodia was left without fleet protection as ships were being prepared to repel Operation Dirge's Lance in the Duro sector. The defenselessness of his homeland saddened Farr, and out of patriotic considerations, he bought the decision to redeploy the fleet. Such people were in the majority in the Senate, those who tried to protect their worlds by redeploying clones, of whom there were not enough to go around. Kaur pushed through the redeployment of the Venator fleet to Rodia, which created a breach in the defense of the Duro system. Grievous immediately took advantage of it. The Duro system fell, and the Republic lost 11 large ships and thousands of clones. The capture of the region opened the way for the CIS fleet to the core worlds. As is customary in such cases, the Senate immediately asked, "Who is to blame?" The investigation was led by Engelman Berez, an agent of the Senate Bureau of Intelligence. The fact that one senator had bribed and lobbied on behalf of another senator was not such a flagrant act and fit quite well within the usual framework. But in this case, the bribe resulted in many thousands of deaths and the loss of military ships and equipment. Berez unraveled the entire chain of events in just 1 month. After this case was reported on the HoloNet News, both senators faced a host of problems, but the matter did not go as far as trial or prison. The CIS propagandists seized on this fact. hyping up the theme of the Galactic Republic's corruption, which dealt a major blow to the image of the Loyalists and the Senate. The deployment of Rhodia's ships did not help. The planet fell prey to pirates, and famine set in. The aid proposal was not even put to a vote. Then Anaconda Farr turned to Newt Gunray, who promised assistance in exchange for the capture of Senator Amidala. Further events, including Farr's betrayal and poisoning by his assistant Lolo Purrs, are described in detail in the Clone Wars animated series. Lolo killed him for plunging Rhodia into war and hoped for a reward of 25,000 credits from the CIS. That was precisely the amount Asajj Ventress had placed on the corrupt senator's life. Anaconda Farr was a complex figure, a scoundrel and a bribe taker, but a patriot. For the sake of his homeland, he resorted to betrayal and deception, as other methods yielded no results in the Republic's rotten system. Supreme Chancellor Valorum tried to reform this system, but only Palpatine managed to bring it under control. A system where personal wealth took precedence over the interests of the state led the Republic to ruin. I hope you enjoyed my story. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. You can also support the channel on Patreon. All links are below the video. See you!